So I want to begin by naming the four theologians we'll sit with this morning. James Baldwin, Toni Morrison, Maya Angelou, and Octavia Butler. Now, they may not have all claimed the title theologian, but make no mistake, that is exactly what they were. Their words, their art, their lives were these sustained meditations on love, liberation, and what it means to be fully human. Black liberation theology doesn't have the luxury of treating love as some abstraction. When your survival itself requires community, when the very humanity has been questioned and denied, when the systems are designed to break you, love cannot be theoretical. It has to be concrete. It has to do something. It has to build something. And ultimately, it must set someone free. And Black liberation theology brings each of us a gift. It brings a love that is forged in struggle, tested by fire, and proven through commitment. A love that knows the difference between the words witness, between words and witness. A love that understands what's at stake when we get it wrong. And together, these four theologians have something to say to us as Unitarian Universalists about the kind of love we claim to center. So I'm going to ask you to do something with me here this morning, to take a breath, to put your hand on your heart if that feels right, and to ask yourself, what does love feel like in my body when love is real? When I have to risk something? When it's the kind of love that actually frees someone? What does that feel like? Because that's what we're after this morning. So I'll jump right in with James Baldwin, who speaks to love this way. Love takes off the mask that we fear we cannot live without and know we cannot live within. Do we need to hear that again? I do. Love takes off the mask that we fear we cannot live without and we know we cannot live within. And Baldwin continues, I use the word love here not merely in the personal sense, but as a state of being or a state of grace, not in the infantile American sense of being made happy, but in the tough and universal sense of quest and daring and growth. Infantile love, a love that needs to be made happy, that needs comfort more than it needs truth. I wonder sometimes if we know the difference. See, Baldwin is calling out a love that tells the truth, a love that has often been stunted or is still developmentally young, a love that can't handle discomfort, a love that, when confronted with hard truths, retreats into arguments about language. And we see this infantile love in our UU congregations when we spend more energy debating what words we use than actually doing the work of liberation. When we get more upset about being called out than about the harm that's being named. When we need people to prove their worth before we'll extend our so-called love. So we saw this pattern across our congregations and communities when the UUA released its report on white supremacy culture. Do you remember that? I watched congregation after congregation spend more energy debating whether the term white supremacy was too inflammatory than actually addressing the patterns the report named. We wanted different language. We wanted softer language that let us feel like good people while continuing to do business as usual. Now, I wasn't here when that report came out, so I don't know how this congregation responded, but I can imagine it wasn't much different, and I understand the impulse. These are big words, hard words, words that make people uncomfortable, and I feel it too. My stomach tightens when I have to name white supremacy or patriarchy or capitalism out loud. My heart races when I think someone might think I'm calling them a bad person, when what I'm actually naming is that they've fallen, and we have fallen into a systemic trap we've all been taught. And when I'm asking you to join me instead, digging out of it, breaking the pattern and doing something different. But here's what I've learned. Me being nice, protecting each of our comforts, avoids the hard conversation. When being kind demands that both of us have the courage to engage in a hard conversation, because that's what love requires. That's what infantile love looks like, the love that needs the right words, the soft words, the comfortable words, more than transformation. Baldwin says no. Love is quest and daring and growth. It's a state of being that can withstand discomfort because it's not about being made happy. It's about becoming free. So if all we do as you use is centered in love, then we have to ask, are we centering quest and transformation? Or are we centering our need for reassurance? Toni Morrison speaks to a love that commits. In her novel, Beloved, she writes simply, love is or it ain't. Then love ain't love at all. Thin love, right? Let that sit for a minute. I love that. Thin love. I love this phrase because it names the patterns we slip into so easily. And if we're honest, we can feel the difference in our bodies between thin love and thick love. Thin love is performative. It posts the meme or the statement and doesn't show up for the work. It says the right words and wears the right t-shirts or buttons, but it won't risk anything. It expresses concern, but won't sacrifice comfort. For the last couple of decades, we in the UU and UU spaces have been working on this, trying not to fall for a white savior attitude, trying to build lasting relationships without judgment, with compassion and humility. We've been learning what it means to get proximate. For those of you in the book discussion, get proximate. To be in relationship with people, not just make statements about them or collect donations for them. But we often, too often maybe, slip into thin love because it's easy to do. Especially when you want to do something and you don't know what to do or where to begin. Let me give you a purely hypothetical picture of what thin love might look like in practice. Let's imagine someone in this congregation reaches out wanting to help with immigration justice work. It's a beautiful impulse. Their heart is in the right place. But when the time for action comes, when it's time to actually drive someone to their asylum hearing with a 6 a.m. pickup and an all-day wait in a courtroom, sitting in hard chairs with fluorescent lights, while anxiety fills the room. They say, I'm not sure I'm the right person for this. Maybe someone who speaks Spanish? Now, the person who has asked and needs the ride speaks perfectly fine English. They don't need translation. They need someone to show up, to sit with them, to not let them wait alone in their anxiety. See, that's thin love. It wants to help, but only if it's convenient, only if it feels comfortable, and only if we're sure we're doing the right thing in the right way. This love lets fear take over. And here's the hard part, really. Thin love makes people prove that they deserve our care. It creates this feeling of us and them, this disconnected relationship where we're on one side extending charity and they're on the other side having to earn it. Thin love says, I'll give you love if you educate me gently enough, if you make me feel good about myself, if you don't make me too uncomfortable. So take a breath. Notice how that lands in your body. Notice if you've ever felt that, either giving thin love or receiving it. Because Morrison says they didn't love at all. Love commits. Real love shows up when it's hard, when you don't know what you're doing, even when it costs you something. Real love doesn't need the other person to earn it or perform for it or make it easy. So much of what I've been talking about lately is breaking patterns, dismantling systems of oppression that show up everywhere in our lives, absolutely everywhere. And that work, that requires thick love, a love we can hold on to, the kind that Morrison's talking about, the love that commits, that doesn't need applause or gratitude or comfort, the love that shows up at 6 a.m. because someone just needs you to. So if all we do is centered in love, and that love is thin love, we can't be sustained by that. It falls apart. It won't be able to hold the weight of what we're being called to do. But here's the piece of liberation theology that often gets missed and that Maya Angelou understood and brought to us again and again. We can't practice liberating love from a place of spiritual poverty. Angelou writes, "You alone are enough. You have nothing to prove to anybody." Now, this isn't narcissism. It is spiritual maturity. When I know my own worth, I don't need to make you prove yours. When my worth doesn't depend on your approval, I don't need you to validate my goodness. However, operating from a place of spiritual immaturity, we still seek that approval instead of offering the affirmation and care. So let me get really honest with you. I've known what this feels like from the inside. There have been times when someone criticized something I said or did, and instead of listening to the harm that they named, I spent all my energy trying to prove that I'm not that kind of person. Instead of facing that harm, I needed them to tell me that I'm still good. I needed their approval. And do you know what that does? It makes their pain about my comfort. It makes their healing wait on my need for reassurance. It's spiritually immature love. That's when we make people prove themselves, when we project our own needs onto the other, when we center a capitalist idea of perfection that undermines everything we are. Infantile love, from Baldwin, is spiritually immature. It makes people prove themselves because it comes from our own unhealed need to prove ourselves. And that love can't stand being challenged because it comes from our own fragile sense of self-worth. Angelou simply says, we just need to grow up. Know that we are enough. Then, only then, we can stop making everyone else prove that they are enough. If all we do is centered in love, we need the spiritual maturity to know that we are enough and everyone else is enough, that no one has to earn it, no one has to perform for it. If all we do in this work of spiritual maturity is center love, then Octavia Butler can show us where love can lead. Butler brings us to this synthesis idea in how we organize, how we move, how we choose our path forward. In her book, Parable of the Talents, she writes, "Choose your leaders with wisdom and forethought. To be led by a coward is to be controlled by all that the coward fears. To be led by a fool is to be led by the opportunists who control the fool. To be led by a thief is to offer up your most precious treasures to be stolen. To be led by a liar is asked to be told lies. To be led by a tyrant is to sell yourself and those you love into slavery." Butler names every kind of fear-based leadership: the coward, the fool, the thief, the liar, and the tyrant. And then she stops. She doesn't finish that list. And I want us to stop right here, to sit in silence for a moment with Butler, to feel it. What does it feel like in your body to sit with the question, what's the alternative of fear? Now, I want to suggest this morning that Butler is leaving room for us to answer the question, what does it look like to be led by love? Not thin love, not infantile love, but as Baldwin described, the quest for daring and growth. Or the thick, committed, showing up love of Morrison. Or the love Angelou grounded for us, rooted in our own self-worth so that we don't diminish anyone else's. That is what love-led leadership looks like. Because fear controls, but love leads. And we get to choose which one we follow. If all we do is centered in love, then we have a choice to make. We can center infantile love, the love that needs to be happy, the love that argues over language while people suffer, the love that makes others prove their worth before we extend our care. Or we can center liberating love. So what might it look like to center Baldwin's quest and transformation, or Morrison's thick commitment, or Angelou's spiritual maturity, or Butler's invitation to choose something other than fear? The call for you this morning is not complicated. Not on the surface. The call is to face your fears. Engage with anti-oppression work to move from study to action, not because any of us are bad people who needs to prove we're good, but because liberating love leads us there. It leads us there because love is, as Baldwin said, a state of being, a way of moving through the world. And it won't be perfect. But what can we gain? We gain each other. We gain freedom. We gain the joy that comes from knowing that we showed up when it mattered. How might you embrace that fierce love, beloveds? How might you embrace that love that transforms not only yourself, but all the world around you? Might this be what it means to be centered in love? Might this be the fierce love that sets us all free? May it be so. Amen. Ashe.